just announced brand new Leica SL3, which is the latest flagship in Leica's mirrorless SL lineup. There's some really nice improvements over the SL2, including, for the first time in an SL camera, phase detection autofocus, but there are a lot more new features that really make this camera not only very competitive, but an outstanding choice for a full-frame mirrorless camera system. So welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the brand new Leica SL3. Leica invited me to come to Lights Park in Wetzlar, Germany 2 weeks ago, and I got to have a 24-hour-ish hands-on with the brand new camera, and it is very impressive, and I want to share a lot with you guys in this video. A lot of the sample images that you're going to see are of the Low collection at the National Auto Museum. The Auto Museum is pretty new, and the Low collection is probably one of the most comprehensive and diverse auto collections of rare cars in really all of Europe. They have about 150 cars that spans about 135 years of auto history. My favorite pieces are the early cars, like the 1912 Rolls-Royce Grey Ghost. That looks like it's brand new at the dealership. They also have early examples of Bentleys, Duesenbergs from the 1930s, rare Bugattis, Mercedes-Benz. They even have a Fiat Topolino that were all on display. So the sample shots that you're going to see in this video are of these cars. Of course, they also have modern Formula One cars of significance, the obligatory DeLorean, Aston Martin, and even a 2005 one-of-a-kind Maybach Accelero. So this was actually a really good place to test the SL3 because not only are you in low light, but there's a lot of colors. So you're going to test the dynamic range, you're going to test the color rendition as well as noise with higher ISOs. But let's get into some of the specs first on the SL3. So the SL3 is built around the 60 megapixel tri-resolution sensor that we saw with the M11 as well as the Q3 cameras. You can output both DNG and JPEG files at either 60, 36, or 18 megapixels. The base ISO in this camera is 50, and you can push the camera all the way up to 100,000. The SL3, as I mentioned, features a new hybrid autofocus system, which uses both contrast as well as phase detection autofocus points, and it also incorporates object detection algorithms, which is a first in an SL camera and quite frankly, long overdue. Of course, the system is very close to what Panasonic is doing in their full-frame mirrorless cameras. The AFS mode takes advantage of the contrast detection points for accuracy. AFC uses phase detection for speed and tracking. And of course, we also have IAF for humans and animals, as well as object recognition. And if you're familiar with the Q3 autofocus system, you'll be right at home with the SL3. The SL3 also features Leica's latest Maestro IV processor, which is one of my favorites really on any camera system. You get very little noise at higher ISOs, and the image quality is absolutely gorgeous with this processor. Colors are well representative, and the files retain depth and contrast even when you're pushing at those higher ISOs. It's on par with the SL2S, but with a 60 megapixel sensor instead of a 24. The Maestro IV offers a significant speed increase as well, so we can now do things like record 8K video or H.265 files. The faster speeds also allow the camera to take advantage of using a CFExpress card. There are dual slots in this camera, but you can still use SD cards as well. But since we're talking about speeds, this is probably a good time to mention the Leica Photos mobile app. Okay, so if you're like me, you probably don't use a lot of camera manufacturers' apps on the phone because, quite frankly, a lot of them are junk. I will not say that about Leica's Photos app. It is actually very good, and it has been very good for a long time. It's just had a speed issue with actually getting your files off of the camera. What I love about the Leica Photos mobile app is that it actually just uses your camera roll to store the DNG files, but what it does is it remembers which files there are, so when you want to clean things up or delete them from the phone after you put them somewhere else, it's really easy to do because you'll see them in Leica Photos. Now, I mentioned speed has been an issue on this app for a while, and what I really love about the new SL3 is, first of all, we have improved Wi-Fi speeds. And so if you watch, these are 60 megapixel files, and you can actually see when I did a little transfer test how fast they are transferring to the phone. The other thing that I really like about it now is we now have USB-C compatibility with M5 if you're using an iPhone or an Apple product, and this really speeds things up if you use the cable. And it's also really easy to use. You literally just plug the cable into the camera, you plug the other end into the phone, and voila, it recognizes the camera. You can bring your photos right in. Now, it's also compatible with Lightroom as well as Capture One. So if you're using either one of those mobile applications, I use the Lightroom mobile app all the time. In fact, all the images that I took on this trip with this camera, I not only used the app to transfer from the camera to the phone, but I stored them on my camera roll, brought them into Lightroom, it uploads them into the cloud, and when I come back here to the studio, it automatically downloads everything, and it is so seamless. This is the way to travel. And we've been waiting for something like this for a long time, and kudos to Leica for actually figuring this out to where it is very usable, so I am really impressed. The SL3 also features some significant changes in the body design over the SL2. Most notably, we have an LED lit power button, which I actually really like. So colors on this button will indicate charging status, for instance, red, green, yellow. And there's also a standby mode, which we didn't have with the standard on and off switch. So it's nice to be able to just put your camera in standby when you're not going to use it for a minute and be able to power it right up very quickly. The body itself is a little bit shorter and a little bit less wide than the SL2, but it's also slightly thicker than the SL2. It still feels extremely solid, and the grip is maybe even more comfortable than the SL2, which is one of my favorites. The screen is now tiltable, which is really nice for high angle or low angle shooting, and the screen itself now features gestures as well as touch functionality like swiping to scroll the menus, or you can go back. You'll also notice a new dial on top of the camera, which is defaulted to control ISO, but what I really love about Leica's approach to this camera, really any camera in the SL line, is that all of the dials are customizable to pretty much whatever you want them to be. And what I really love about the SL3 is it gives you enough custom functionality. Also, you'll notice, much like this is an SL2S, but the buttons aren't labeled as anything, so you're not going to look at it and see ISO even though you've mapped it to something else. And so, first of all, that makes sense because you can customize it exactly how you want it. The other thing I loved about the SL3 is it gives you enough functionality between gestures on the screen, all the custom function buttons. You probably don't ever need to dive into the menus once you have it set up. Plus, you have all your user save settings, so you can set it up for different scenarios. It's a very functional and very versatile camera system. You'll also notice that the 3 interface buttons that are pretty much on every Leica camera have been moved. They're now on the right side of the display screen. So this makes one-handed operation possible. It's a really welcome addition to the camera's design. And since we're talking about usability, so when I was in Germany at Lights Park, they did a presentation before we had hands-on with the cameras. We could hear about it, and we could hear from the engineers and the people who actually worked on the cameras, the designers as well. And for the first time at any camera presentation that I've ever been to, they actually had a UX designer come up and talk about the changes and the overhaul to the design system itself. Now, there's nothing drastic on here, so if you're used to the SL system, you're going to find it very comfortable. You'll know where everything is. But what's really nice is just having a consistency in icons, the way they display, the way they're organized, the way you're going to go through the screens. This is something that's really welcome. It's very well thought out, and there's a whole system that they've designed for the new icons. In fact, Leica like to call them Lycons. But anyway, it was very cool, and I'm really glad to see a camera actually put an emphasis on user interface design. It's something that is much needed in this industry. Another feature that I really like on the SL3 is that when you pair this up with the mobile app, you can install a new color profile, which Leica call Eternal. It is available in the app, like I mentioned, and it looks great. The reds are really pronounced, the contrast is good, and this profile actually embeds into the raw data, so it's not something you have to burn into a JPEG. And I thought this was a really interesting idea that's come from Leica, and I can see a lot of use from this down the road. The profile is very saturated and is very intensive, and so you can bring it into Lightroom and you can actually take out the embedded color profile and you can go back to Adobe Color or whatever you want it to be. I like to use my own presets still, one, because I designed them and I know what to expect out of them. I also thought that the reds were really intense with the Eternal profile, and sometimes I want my yellows to come up for more of a film look, and so I'm able to do that with my presets. If you were interested in checking out my Kodak and Fujifilm simulations, I'll put a link in the show description below. I use them all the time. You're seeing them on some of the images here. They're very cool and worth checking out. And a few other new features. For those of you concerned with weather resistance, the SL3 does have an IP54 rating, which is not bad for an interchangeable lens camera. And the SL3 also uses the new higher capacity battery that was introduced in the Q3. Now, you can use the older SL2 batteries. I only had one battery when we were out shooting, and so I brought some of my SL2 batteries. You do get a warning, which is really interesting, and it just tells you that you're using an older battery that's a lower power capacity, and it just says some features may not be available. I don't know which features those are, it just says some of them. And I'm not going to get into reviewing this camera that deeply because I do want to say that this was pre-production firmware that we were using, and I don't really think it's fair to review that. I want to review what is available to the public once it comes out. So I will do a more in-depth review later on down the line. So to wrap this up, what do I think about the SL3? So obviously I thought the SL3 was pretty awesome, if you can't tell from my enthusiasm here. I do think the SL system is Leica's approach moving forward. I think the L-mount alliance was really really smart. I think that what you get out of the L-mount alliance is the ability to have different companies kind of fill different needs in the lineup. So for instance, I reviewed the Panasonic 100mm macro lens, which is one of my favorite lenses that's come out in the last couple of years. I think that lens is amazing. Leica don't have a 1:1 SL macro lens. They just don't. So if that's something you need, well, you can use the Panasonic lens and all the functionality works on the camera. And so that's something that is really cool. Now, I do want to kind of compare the SL to some of the other cameras in Leica's lineup. So one of the most obvious would probably be the Leica M system. This is my Leica M11. I bought this as soon as it came out. This is really my daily driver. I'm a huge M fan. There have been a lot of people who want to see an M camera come out without a rangefinder. They want to see it with an EVF. And while I think that's okay, that is not what the M is. That is actually what an SL camera is. And I think this is the system for it. The M represents an older camera design that is very traditional, and it's for those who want to use it. It is the only rangefinder in existence, other than you could argue the Pixie cameras, which are APS-C size sensors at this point, and so it's really the only competitive one. Plus, having just a traditional M mount, I mean, the M11 is an incredible camera. However, if you're interested in autofocus and you're interested in EVFs and what technology can do for you, that's where the SL system comes in. Another comparison you could make is the SL to the Q3, and the Q3 is by far Leica's most popular camera. A lot of people really like to get into that system. There's a lot of things that I love about the Q3 cameras, or the Q cameras in general. You have a built-in lens, so it is not interchangeable, and you're going to actually change your focal length by cropping a zoom in the camera, and it works much like a rangefinder. I think it's really well done. However, it's a little bit more limiting, but it's a small camera system. You can take it anywhere. It's very portable. I think that a lot of people will get into the Q system because of that, but quite frankly, I also think a lot of people get into the Q system because it seems like a good price point for Leica. It's going to be a little bit cheaper and the lens is included. However, I think one thing you're looking at later on down the line with something like the Q is it's not expandable. When the Q4 comes out one day, you'll have to replace your entire system, which from a cost perspective doesn't make as much sense. Again, this is where the SL comes into play. Now, I want to get into this when I do a full review on this, but one of the things that I do love about the SL is that you can use the native SL lenses, which are pretty large. They're designed for optical excellence. And I think that's something that is really cool. Leica is an optics company and it's something they excel in, and I think that's something that you need. However, the trade-off is you're going to have bigger and heavier lenses. One of the things that I love about the SL system, and this is my SL2S, is that you can use the Leica M adapter and adapt just about any rangefinder lens to this, which gives you a manual focus only lens, but it's very small, very compact, very lightweight. One of the things that I would love to see Leica or any camera company do is give us more features and functionality in terms of manual focus. We have all these things with autofocus, but there are some manual focus aids that I think would be very easy to do, and I'll get into this in a later video. But of course, as always, I would love to know what you guys think, so feel free to drop me a comment below, ask me any questions. This is a pretty amazing camera, so thank you, Leica, for having me out to Germany and allowing me to try this out and test it. More videos to come, I guarantee. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.